You promised you'd be gone when I get back, didn't you? Also, the month is almost over. Let's get the final job done and hand over the divorce papers.
Beside my husband, Mike, stood a woman and a child. The woman was holding hands with a child who looked to be about preschool age.
Let me introduce you to my wife, Jessica.
Jessica was still young and quite flashy.
As I mentioned earlier, we're no longer related. You and your son have no right to stay in this house.
With that, my ex-husband suddenly sneered.
Sign the divorce papers and get out of the house, you and your son.
His gaze looked down on me and my son, Ted, with a triumphant gleam in his eyes. Mike probably believed everything was going his way, but when he learned the truth, he collapsed on the spot.
How could you do that? I thought you were just a housewife who knew nothing.
As Mike muttered, Ted said in disbelief,
Huh? Dad, you don't know anything?
When Ted showed him a book, Mike went half mad. My name is Michelle Isaacs, 42 years old. I work part-time and am a housewife. I have a 16-year-old son with my husband, who works at a trading company. Mike often travels domestically and internationally for work, so I've mostly raised Ted on my own. Currently, Mike is on a solo assignment, so we mostly communicate via online calls or messages. He's within the US, but it's not practical for him to come back daily. He only comes home during long holidays. Even then, he often visits his parents' house, which is about an hour's drive away, so we rarely have family time at home. I don't think our relationship is particularly good or bad. After being married for over a decade, I suppose that's normal. We have familial affection, but there's no romantic love between us. Mike works for a fairly large trading company, so we've never had financial difficulties. Since Mike was often away, I stayed at home as a full-time housewife when Ted was young. Mike agreed, wanting to avoid Ted to feel lonely. However, as Ted started the upper grades of elementary school and Mike started living separately on his solo assignment, Ted seemed to find me increasingly bothersome. Thinking back, my brother was the same at that age, so it must be a phase. That's when I started wanting to work.
It's fine if you work, but I don't want to look like I can't provide for my family.
Mike's first response when I consulted him was that,
Choose something that feels like an extension of your hobbies or something that allows you to level up in one way or another.
I thought any job that suited me would be fine, but considering Mike's opinion, I decided to work as an assistant at a flower arrangement class. I hold a flower designer qualification, and since Mike often interacts with international clients, I thought it would be beneficial.
Great, that would be useful if I get transferred abroad.
Mike agreed, so I've been working part-time there ever since. Financially, we're not struggling, but I wanted to discuss Ted's future with Mike.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about the future.
Mike's answer was reassuring. Ted is a high school freshman and will be a sophomore this fall. It's time to start seriously thinking about his future.
I'll be returning to the head office this fall. It perfectly aligns with the beginning of Ted's school semester.
Mike's future plans during his long holiday visit were unexpected.
I want a divorce.
He started without giving a reason.
We've been separated for a long time, and I think it's a valid reason for divorce. It's not too late for both of us to start new lives.
Wait, this is so sudden. It was a complete shock. I hurried to stop my husband's words. Separated? You were just on a solo assignment. I never considered it a separation.
But you didn't come with me, did you?
There was Ted's school to consider, and your father, Robert. Robert is still alive and living alone in a senior apartment complex. Originally, this house was my husband's family home, but when we got married, his parents moved out and into that complex. Mike and Robert never had a good relationship. While Mike's mother was still alive, he maintained contact with his parents, but after her death, he completely cut ties.
I told you to ignore him, didn't I? He's in a proper facility, so we don't need to take care of him.
You say that, but we can't just ignore him. The rift between Mike and Robert wasn't caused by any significant event. It was a series of small things over the years, and some parent-child relationships just don't mesh well. Robert and his wife, Mike's mother, were very kind people. That's why I maintained a good relationship with them and continued to stay in touch with Robert even after he was alone. I visit his apartment occasionally too.
You did that on your own, right? I never asked you to.
That's true, but it's not something I can just dismiss.
Same goes for Ted's school. He could have transferred over to where I was if we really wanted that.
You're the one who insisted on putting Ted in that school. Ted took entrance exams and got into a school that is well connected with a university, allowing students from that school to easily enter that university.
I wanted that too, but he still could have transferred if it was necessary, right?
That's true, but it's not that simple.
Exactly. You chose not to live with me, so here.
Mike handed me a completed divorce form.
I'm back, but in this state, we can't stay together. I'll stay at a hotel.
With those words, Mike left the house. I was left in a daze.
What are you doing sitting here in the dark? Wait, where's Dad?
Ted had been out watching a movie with friends. He got back after the late summer sun had fully set. Mike had returned and left around the middle of the afternoon. Apparently, I had been sitting there for hours.
What's this?
Ted picked up the divorce papers from the coffee table. What should I do? How do I explain this? I hadn't even sorted out my own thoughts, let alone figured out how to explain it to Ted. Seeing me frozen, Ted sighed, put down the divorce papers, and walked out. I'm going to be abandoned not just by my husband, but by my son too. As I sat there in shock, Ted came back in.
Eat something first. You can't think straight on an empty stomach. Eat well, sleep well, and then think about what to do next.
Ted handed me a plate with 2 large, uneven sandwiches. Big, slightly uneven sandwiches. But he must have made them with great effort. Tears started streaming down my face.
Just eat already.
Ted pretended not to see my tears as he said that, and I ate the sandwiches while crying. Even with only a few ingredients, they tasted better than any feast I'd ever had. After Mike returned to his solo assignment, he sent a few messages. They were something like this.
I want the divorce finalized by next fall. I'll pay child support for Ted until he turns 18. Since he'll turn 18 while still in high school, I'll cover his expenses until graduation.
I was stunned by his condescending tone, as if he were doing us a favor. Ted is not just my child but ours, and I couldn't believe how arrogantly he stated his basic obligations.
My solo assignment will end in the fall, and when I return, I plan to live in the house. Prepare to move out by then. 6 months should be enough time to find a decent place. I have some compassion, so I'll cover the moving expenses.
Since he's telling me to leave the home I've lived in for years, I definitely expect him to pay if I need to move. However, I don't see the necessity at all. Why should I have to leave this house?
The divorce is due to a natural failing out between us, so I won't pay any alimony. But I do acknowledge your hard work as a housewife and mother, so I'm willing to provide some financial assistance. Of course, I won't ask you for alimony either.
I certainly don't feel the need to pay him any alimony. It's not like I've been living a carefree life. Though we've been living apart, I visited him with Ted whenever he couldn't come back, and we interacted like a normal family during those times. I can't accept a simple falling out as a reason.
If you can't make a living with your current job, I'm willing to help you find a new one. But that would mean leaving this town. I doubt you'd enjoy seeing me regularly anyway.
It's true that I can't sustain myself with just the assistant job at the flower arrangement class. But being told to leave this town and find a job elsewhere is something I can't accept. Why should I have to do that?
I'll grant you custody of Ted. You've lived together for years, and it would be more comfortable for him. Besides, he's almost an adult. He doesn't need to rely on us forever. If Ted needs anything, I'm willing to consult, but I won't ask for a visitation.
If we do get divorced, I definitely plan to have custody of Ted. But from the way this is written, it seems like Mike is ready to abandon our son too. How can he be so heartless? Ted will be devastated if he knows about this. I sighed after reading everything. None of it makes sense to me. How selfish can he be? When he first mentioned divorce, I was shocked and felt despair, but now I feel like I'm the one who should be done with such a selfish person. I decided to visit Mike at his solo assignment location to discuss this. It was during work hours, but I had a spare key to his apartment. When I entered, the room was as tidy as ever. It had no signs of being lived in. Mike was always meticulous, but it really looked like a model home. As I waited, Mike returned in the evening.
You should have told me you were coming.
Mike sounded annoyed.
Did you bring the signed divorce papers today? You should have just handed them in. No need to tell me about it beforehand.
Without even glancing at me, he took off his suit jacket and loosened his tie. He carefully hung each item, pulling out any wrinkles. He was always like this. It reminded me of when we used to live together. Everything had to be in its place.
Did you think I'd have a woman here for a surprise inspection? Sorry to disappoint you.
Indeed, there was no sign of that. What about dinner?
I ate out. That's usually the case. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a home-cooked meal.
Mike said sarcastically, pulling a cold beer from the fridge and sitting at the table to drink.
See, this is why I want a divorce. I'm tired of living like this for years.
Then why didn't you ask me to come?
With Ted and your part-time job, you have your own routine. I couldn't ask you to drop everything.
Mike took another sip of beer.
Living like this, one day I just thought, maybe I don't need a family.
He insisted that the reason for the divorce was the separation due to his solo assignment. Then at least wait until Ted graduates from high school. It's just 2 more years. No, a year and a half.
No, I want the divorce by next fall.
What's happening in the fall? Mike's tone changed slightly to my spontaneous question.
I told you, I'm going back to the head office. I thought it was a good opportunity.
Can we at least spend the last year as a family until then?
No, it has to be by next fall.
The discussion went nowhere, and Mike was adamant about getting a divorce by next fall. I couldn't do anything, so I left his apartment, stayed in a hotel that night, and returned home the next day. I couldn't bear spending any more time alone with him in that apartment. After that, I stopped visiting him. I realized it was pointless. I communicated important matters through messages that would leave a record and began to prepare for the fall. First, I addressed the parts of his proposal that I couldn't accept. I insisted he pay for Ted's tuition until he graduates from college. If he couldn't agree, I wouldn't sign the divorce papers. He angrily called me.
I said I'd pay child support until he turns 18. If you refuse, I won't pay a dime after the divorce.
That's not possible. We're still married until the divorce is final, and you're obligated to support Ted until he's an adult. After several back and forths, Mike finally gave in.
Fine, I'll pay for Ted's college tuition, but only for 4 years. If he takes longer, I'm not paying beyond that.
Agreed. 4 years it is, and I want it in a legal document.
You don't trust me?
Of course not. He suddenly demanded a divorce with flimsy reasons. Without proper documentation, he could change his mind any time. If you don't agree, we can go to mediation, and if that fails, to court. He reluctantly agreed to put it in a legal document.
But I won't pay any alimony.
That's fine. I won't ask for it.
Then hurry up and file the divorce papers.
Every time he pressured me, I brought up another unresolved issue. We need to discuss the division of assets as well.
I supported you while you were unemployed, and now you want more?
I wasn't a parasite, I was raising our child. If you consider that freeloading, we can settle it in court. He grudgingly agreed to the asset division, and we documented that too. Given his high salary, the amount was substantial.
This should be enough. Just file the divorce papers.
Well, since you gave me until next fall, we have time. Let's see if anything else comes up.
If you think stalling will make me reconsider, you're mistaken.
As fall approaches, Mike becomes increasingly irritated. Why are you so annoyed? A slight delay shouldn't matter.
It matters a lot.
Is there a specific reason for the urgency? If you explain, maybe I'll consider it. Despite my offer to compromise, he denied any specific reason. So I felt justified in delaying until I was satisfied. Right now, I hold the power. I'll take my time. Alongside dragging out the signing, I continued with my plans, and the months flew by.
When are you going to file the divorce papers? I can't believe it's already a whole new year.
Mike, who didn't come home for New Year's, sounded desperate. Yes, it's a new year, but we still have time until fall. A slight delay shouldn't matter.
I want the divorce finalized before I return to the head office.
Even if you say that, it's hard to decide, and I have a lot to handle. I dodge my husband's demands.
So, have you decided on a place to live yet?
Don't worry, it's all set.
Good, because I'll be commuting from that house starting this fall.
Mike sounded genuinely relieved by my words. Take care when you come back.
You say that, but you and Ted would have left the house by the time I move back in. Remember, I'm not coming back to you too.
As if I needed reminding. I had no intention of accepting him as family anymore. In the last week of August, Mike returned home. All the arrangements were made, but the divorce papers hadn't been filed yet.
You promised you'd be gone when I get back, right? The month is almost over, so let's get this last job done and hand over the divorce papers.
Beside Mike stood a woman and a child. The woman was holding hands with a preschool-aged child.
Let me introduce you to my wife, Jessica.
Jessica was still young and quite flashy. Nice to meet you. Is that your son? Jessica awkwardly hid the child behind her. And what's your name, little one?
Hey, stop that. It's none of your business.
Mike shielded the child from me.
As I said, we're no longer related. You and your son have no right to stay in this house.
With that, Mike sneered.
Sign the divorce papers and get out of the house, both of you.
His gaze was triumphant as he looked down on Ted and me. So that's what this was all about.
What does it matter? All the arrangements are done. We just need to file the papers, and there's no alimony.
I'm relieved to hear that. I've heard you've taken care of everything. No need to feel guilty in any way.
Jessica's words were likely directed at Mike.
Yeah, I wanted to have everything settled by today, but I'm sorry about the delay.
Well, at least it'll be done before Joshua's school enrollment.
So that was why Mike rushed the divorce. He wanted their child to start school with a proper family. I could understand that as a parent, but that's a separate matter. I turned to Mike and Jessica. As for the alimony, I will be taking it.
But we agreed in the legal document, no alimony.
Yes, for the divorce. I pointed to the prepared legal document. We agreed not to pay alimony for the divorce, but I will claim compensation for your relationship with this woman and her child. I'll get some from her too.
Don't be ridiculous. I won't pay a cent.
Mike shouted angrily. Joshua flinched and clung to Jessica. I'm not joking. Adultery claims can be made within 3 years of discovery. It's all clearly stated. Divorce alimony and adultery compensation are separate. And now that I know the real reason for the divorce wasn't the long solo assignment, I'll be claiming divorce alimony as well.
What?
The real reason is you want to remarry her and recognize the child as your own. That warrants alimony. It's made clear by law. If the divorce was done through deceit or threats, the divorce itself can be annulled. Marriages entered into through fraud or duress can be annulled by family court. I showed the documents I had to Mike and Jessica. The divorce isn't finalized yet, so I think we can also amend the content of that legal document. Mike's hands trembled as he held the papers. So let's discuss alimony for the divorce once again. I told him with a broad smile.
Then the agreement about Ted's tuition should be scratched.
That's not possible. There's no reason to annul that.
It's the same legal document.
Mike desperately argued, but it wouldn't work. It's the same, but the contents are different. If I had lied, your argument might hold, but I haven't lied about anything. This is the truth. I want Mike to fulfill his parental duties for Ted, and he agreed to that. There's no falsehood in that. So your claim won't hold.
Fine, I get it. I'll pay. Just give me the damn papers.
Thank you. I smiled broadly, as brightly as possible to make Mike and Jessica feel as regretful as possible.
Greedy woman.
Mike spat out.
All I gotta do is pay up. Just hand over the divorce papers.
Sure, I already filed them this morning. Here is the receipt. I handed Mike the certificate of acceptance for the divorce papers.
Now that I have this, it's settled.
Mike showed it to Jessica, and they nodded in satisfaction.
Then our business here is done. You have no reason to stay, so get out.
Actually, Ted and I have the right to stay here. You're the ones who need to leave.
Don't be ridiculous. This is my house.
Poor Mike didn't know. I needed to explain it to him properly. Who legally owns the houses?
It's my father. What's his is mine.
No, the house is in my name. Mike looked shocked for a moment, then laughed.
Do you think you own the place just because you reside here?
I'm not making that mistake.
Once we're divorced, you have no relation to my father, and thus no right to live here.
With a sigh, I handed him another document.
What is this?
Mike's eyes widened as he looked at the papers. I was adopted by Robert. He decided to leave this house to me. I showed Mike the family register. It clearly listed me as an adopted child.
That's ridiculous.
See, it's true. Robert appreciated that I always cared for him. After Mike asked for a divorce, I consulted Robert. My biological parents had already passed away. They both died shortly after I got married. My in-laws treated me like their own daughter, so I cherished them even more than their own son did. Robert suggested we investigate, and he hired a detective agency. The result revealed that Mike had a woman and a secret child. You requested the solo assignment to live with her, didn't you? Jessica met Mike while working at a club. She was only 20 at the time, but quickly became close with Mike and ended up in a serious relationship. And then she got pregnant. Mike decided to live a double life, to be with Jessica and their child. I visited you several times at your solo assignment location, but now I understand why there was no trace of a woman. Mike maintained 2 homes at his assignment location. One was a sweet home for them. The other was a decoy for when I visited, to keep his affair hidden. Ted and I visited Mike often after he started his solo assignment. I used to be impressed by how neat the place was, but it makes sense now. You barely lived there. Mike even installed cameras in the decoy house to get notifications when someone entered. When Robert found out about this, he was furious and decided to cut you off entirely, leaving everything to Ted. That's why he offered to adopt me.
No way.
Mike probably thought everything was going according to his plan. But upon learning the truth, he collapsed on the spot. Do you understand what disinheritance means? Robert is in the process of doing that.
What is that?
Simply put, it's a process where Robert legally removes you from his inheritance. Once the family court approves it, you're no longer an heir, and everything will go to Ted. A person who holds property can exclude an heir if there are valid reasons. In this case, Mike's near-total estrangement from his father and his appalling treatment of his wife and child led Robert to this decision. After the property holder or decedent passes away, the expected heir has a right to a forced share, which is the minimum amount of inheritance they are entitled to. Disinheritance is the last resort when the decedent wishes to deny even this minimum inheritance. Robert decided to do this because of his long-standing conflict with Mike, his gratitude towards me, his son's wife, for supporting him, and as an apology for Mike's actions. When Mike loses his heir status, Ted will inherit as a substitute heir. However, if Mike disputes this decision, it will go to court. To prepare for this, Robert adopted me and transferred the house to me as a lifetime gift. Robert and I agreed to this.
How could you do this? I thought you were just a clueless housewife.
Mike muttered, and Ted said in disbelief.
Dad, don't you know anything?
Ted handed Mike a book.
The Brilliant Deductions of Mrs. Rose? What is this?
I know it. It's a hugely popular novel right now, and it's about to be made into an anime. I've read it too, and I love it.
Mom wrote that book. She studied a lot to write it and became quite knowledgeable about the law and other things.
Mike and Jessica were stunned. I was indeed an inexperienced housewife who hadn't done much, just as my husband thought. But I loved writing, and I had been secretly posting novels on a submission site without my husband's knowledge. Setting the stories in the flower arrangement class where I worked part-time, I created a series where Mrs. Rose, the class assistant and housewife, solved tough cases. It became a huge hit.
I never heard about this.
I was going to tell you when the anime deal came through, but then you brought up divorce. Too bad for you.
Then the book royalties are marital property. How much will you make from the anime? We need to divide that too.
Too bad, the divorce is final. The royalties and anime profits have nothing to do with you. Hearing this, Mike shouted, "No way," and kept repeating, "This can't be true." Incredible. After trying to deceive and discard me for years, now you see my value? From now on, talk to my lawyer. Now, get out. I promptly kicked Mike and Jessica out. I felt sorry for little Joshua, but there was nothing I could do for him. I received multiple requests for reconciliation from my ex-husband, but I would never accept that. Forget all that. Make sure you officially recognize Joshua. He's starting elementary school soon, and it's not fair to keep him in limbo. Jessica also pressured him to recognize Joshua, and it seems they got married and became a proper family. It's only right for the sake of their child. Once Joshua's elementary school entrance ceremony was over and their life settled down, I sent a certified letter demanding alimony. After all, it was a long-term affair and a double life. The amount of alimony was substantial.
You've made quite a bit of money, haven't you? Can you let go of the alimony or reduce it?
Such a ridiculous request was, of course, rejected. No matter what I have, it doesn't change the fact that I was hurt by what you did. Alimony is compensation for that hurt, and since you can only apologize through money, you need to pay a proper amount. My income is irrelevant. When I threatened to take the matter to mediation or court, he reluctantly paid. Apparently, he borrowed the money from his company. He thought he could quietly repay it while continuing to work at the head office, but his actions became known to the company. They even found out that he had requested the solo assignment for immoral reasons. The proverb, "Heaven's net is wide, but nothing escapes it," really applies here. As they say, God is watching. The higher ups at the company were furious that such an immoral reason was used. As a result, he was demoted and transferred to a subsidiary in a rural area. His salary was reduced, and now he and Jessica work hard to pay off the debt. But in the end, it might be better this way. In a new place, Joshua can grow up without anyone knowing about his parents' past and start fresh as a normal family. Innocent children shouldn't suffer for their parents' mistakes. As for me, after the divorce, my work was adapted into an anime as planned and became quite a sensation. Merchandise was released, and in this digital age, the physical book with special bonuses was a huge hit. The publisher keeps pushing me for my next work. With my busy schedule, I have no time to dwell on past hurts. The anime is also very popular overseas. My works are broadcast in various countries, and the international response has been significant. Despite everything, Ted has grown up straight and strong. He's entering university this fall, and he says he wants to find what he's truly passionate about during those 4 years, just like I did.
No matter what happens, it's my life. I won't rely on you, Mom.
He says such cheeky things, but as a parent, I'd be happy if he relied on me a bit more. Maybe I'll write a new story about a cheeky college student. I have a feeling the next one will be a hit too. Watching my dependable son, I can't help but think so.